Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Rockies Daily Show. I'm your host, Scott Ayers, where we talk all things Colorado Rockies. And we're in a pretty interesting time. 2025 is behind us, 100 losses, no more. Let's look to the future, and we're in the middle of winter meetings where the Rockies are currently talking with free agents, making different connections with organizations, something they haven't done in quite some time. And I think it's important we first look at free agency, where the Colorado Rockies have some desperate needs pretty much across the board. You could start with starting pitching. You could talk about the outfield. You could talk about the infield. I think, though, for today, let's talk about the first base position. Something that the Rockies could use as a holdover before Charlie Condon is brought up. I think this is something where the Rockies could look at maybe a 1-year, 2-year contract. One potential target would be Josh Bell. I think he could be actually someone that has still a little bit of power in his bat and could actually perform pretty well at Coors Field. However, if we want to get weird, and trust me, we like to get weird here, someone that the Rockies could look at if they're willing to spend the money, and I know Dick Monfort, he loves spending money on players like Chris Bryant and Ian Desmond, could be Pete Alonso. Now, this would obviously throw a wrench into things like someone like Charlie Condon. However, the power that Pete Alonso would bring to Coors Field alone, the guy would probably have 300 home runs, 300 strikeouts, and probably bat 230, but it would be the most power that the Rockies have had in quite some time. Do I think someone like Pete Alonso wants to come to Coors Field while they're in the middle of a rebuild? Probably not. However, I don't think it's crazy for Colorado to think about taking swings at guys like Alonso or other players that have a ton of power. Because think about it. For every pitcher that probably does not want to come to Coors Field, there has to be at least a batter or two that looks at just the potential and says, you know what, that could be actually pretty fun. What the Rockies are more likely going to do, though, is go after players that are looking for a fresh start, right? Guys that might be on the tail end of their career and want an opportunity to start playing because there's plenty of opportunities right now in Colorado. Next, let's talk about something that I think is pretty exciting, and that is this front office, right? We don't have to look at speculation or rumors or anything like that. They've made their hires. Paul DePodesta, he's the new, he's in charge of baseball operations, and of course they hired Josh Burns as the GM, and these are two hires where you just have to give it up. The Rockies decide not hire internally, but instead they go externally, and these were moves that I think the fan base desperately needed. I'm really excited to see what Burns can do, someone who just worked in the Dodgers organization, who has seen winning at its finest, and now has an opportunity to see what he can do with the Colorado Rockies. One of the big things that I mentioned, though, that the Rockies have been known notoriously for is just their poor connections across all of Major League Baseball. Just their inability to communicate with other teams. And so now you bring in two guys that have done it before, that have had a lot of success. And I think what you'll see is you'll just see improved relationships with teams across the league, but you're also going to see actually built out analytical teams for the Rockies, which has been an oxymoron in the past. This has probably been one of the worst organizations when it comes to actually analyzing what will work at Coors Field. So to have two guys that I think can make big improvements in that department is going to do wonders for Colorado. Is it something that we're going to see right away in 2026? Probably not. It's going to take a little bit of time to actually build something. However, when it comes to the most promising things for this organization, the fact that it's at the top has to mean something. And so for the Rockies to be here and can look at what's down the road, you have to be somewhat positive about that, which is a lot considering what the Rockies have gone through the last three seasons. The three worst seasons in Rockies history, all just right behind us. And so to actually make these moves, to have just something to cling on to, is a big deal for a fan base that just wants something in a city that has had a ton of success in their other sports, right? The Nuggets are good, the Avs are good, the Broncos are good. What are the Colorado Rockies? The redheaded stepchild. And that has to change. I think any Rockies fan will tell you that has to change, and it starts now. And it starts with the exec positions. It starts with the GM, goes down to the coaching, the players, everything like that. But that is obviously something that's really exciting for the Rockies. In the next couple of months, we will see how they build out this team. But until then, one of the things that we can talk about are potential trade targets. And I think the number one guy right now on the Colorado Rockies is Brenton Doyle, who could be dealt, right? He's got a gold glove. He's got 2 gold gloves. But he really had a bit of a disappointing campaign in 2025. His hitting was down. His slugging was down. And he just didn't perform to the way that the fans thought, right? I think he was batting close to 300 at home and about 190 on the road. And it's common to see those splits where better at cores than on the road. But something that dramatic just can't happen for a guy that you really wanted to be a cornerstone or a flagship piece. That being said, I think Doyle could be someone that is dealt for, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, something like starting pitching prospects. Who knows, really? I personally would love to see Doyle remain a Rocky. However, if you are to see any trades being done in the next couple of months, or really at the trade deadline, Brenton Doyle's name is going to be brought up a lot. And that's one thing that the Rockies have struggled with, is knowing when to pull the trigger on a trade and when to hold off. And so Brenton Doyle will be kind of that first case study with this new GM and executive group of what do we do with a player that has trade value. Do we see him as a potential piece to keep, or is it someone that we could actually get starting pitching for? Because I think that's really an important piece in all this, is if you can get quality starting pitching, do you go for it? And the answer might be yes. It's just hard to know based on what we've seen with starting pitching here at Coors Field in general. I personally would love to keep Brenton Doyle. I think he's a rock star. Two gold gloves. And I think he turned his bat around really in the second half of the season. So I do think that's something we should see in 2026. That being said, could be a guy that gets dealt here in the next couple of months. Finally, let's talk about someone who has less than 0 trade value. It's actually impressive, Chris Bryant. If you looked at a scale of what trade value is, and this was 0. Just right here in the middle is 0, right? Typically, it'd be, we'd be at 50 here. This is 0. We've got Chris Bryant right about here. And it is someone that you do feel bad for, but you also don't feel that bad for, right? Because he signed, $150 million contract right before 2022, and he's played about 170 games since then. He's been dealing with all kinds of crippling injuries. And I think the big question is, can the Rockies squeeze any value out of Chris Bryant to make a deal? Because when it comes to trade talks, I think the guy that most fans would hope to see get dealt is Chris Bryant. But the only way to do that is if he can actually build some value to what he offers right now. The only way we see that is in April, May, and June. We get Chris Bryant's best months as a Rocky. And unfortunately, I don't know what that actually looks like. Is that just playing 50 games? Is that batting 250 with, 400 slugging? Is that too much to ask for a guy that's getting paid that much? I'm not sure, but it's clear that he is at this point in his career where he can barely ever stay on the field. And when he does, he's not effective. I think that's the worst part in all this. It's not like when he plays, he's this maestro. He stinks. He stinks right now. And I don't know what the Rockies do, because it's such a big contract. And it will probably be one of the big things that this front office has to navigate in the 2026 season, is how do you navigate Chris Bryant? How can you get him to just play a little? Try to add any sort of value so that the Rockies can hopefully move him by the deadline. I think that is best case scenario for Colorado. So you get some value, you trade him for some prospects, and you're done with it. Wipe your hands clean. We're moving on. We're getting the heck out of town, because that's really best case scenario for the Rockies. But until then, I think it's in everyone's best interest. We cheer on Chris Bryant. If you pray for the doctors to fix all that's wrong with him. Pray for the joints. And if you don't pray, and maybe you do like voodoo magic, do the voodoo magic. Whatever it is that you do it. so that Chris Bryant can heal. Which is obviously me somewhat joking, but seriously, we need this guy just to play a little. That's all I'm asking for. I'll pitch in for the contract if I can get you to play 50 games. But I'll do it. But until then, and there's a lot to be had with Chris Bryant. And maybe kind of going really quickly back to free agency, maybe something that the Rockies front office can use as a precautionary tale. And obviously this is a pretty smart front office group. But you look at Chris Bryant, you go, that kind of stinks. Let's make sure we don't replicate that. But until then, this is Rockies Daily. We're bringing you daily videos Monday through Friday. So make sure to hit that like button, subscribe so you can get more videos like this one. Until then, hope you have a great day.